In the early 2000s, a new machine arrived with the kind of hype usually reserved for major inventions. It was called the Segway, and it promised to change the way people moved through everyday life. Not across countries, not even across cities, just those awkward short trips that felt too far to walk and too small to drive. The pitch sounded simple and almost irresistible. Step on, lean forward, and the device carried you along on two wheels while it kept itself upright. That self-balancing trick sat at the center of the excitement. Supporters treated it like a leap forward in safety and ease, especially for streets and sidewalks where cars and pedestrians constantly competed. To many people, it looked like the missing link between walking and driving, a personal transporter that could cut effort and reduce risk at the same time. If it worked as promised, it could have made short-distance travel feel controlled, predictable, and accessible. That was the expectation, and for a moment it felt like the future had already arrived. After the launch buzz faded, the Segway met the real world. People admired it, then hesitated. It cost far more than a bicycle, yet it did not replace a car. It moved faster than walking, but it still demanded balance, attention, and confidence. For most commuters, the question stayed simple. What problem did it solve well enough to justify buying one? Then came the practical barriers. Sidewalks felt like the obvious place, but rules varied from city to city, and many areas treated it like a motor vehicle. Roads created a different problem, because the Segway did not mix comfortably with cars. Even when it was allowed, riders still needed space to store it, charge it, and secure it. Convenience started to slip. So adoption narrowed. The Segway turned into something people rented, demonstrated, or used occasionally, not a device they built their daily life around. It showed up in airports, campuses, and large facilities, places with controlled paths and clear reasons to use it. The grand promise of a commuter revolution lost momentum, and a quieter question took its place. Who exactly was it for? As more people actually rode Segways outside controlled demos, a new reality set in. The machine stayed upright by constantly correcting itself, but riders still had to balance, steer, and judge space like on any small vehicle. When that went wrong, it went wrong fast. Some users overestimated what it could handle. Others simply reacted late. The result was sudden tumbles, twisted wrists, and bruised ribs. The most common trouble started at low speeds, exactly where the Segway had promised confidence. A curb, a crack, a sudden stop, even a tight turn could throw a rider forward. People stepped on, expecting stability, and got a lesson in momentum. Helmet use stayed inconsistent, and many treated short trips as harmless. Emergency rooms did not. Reports of concussions and broken bones started showing up, and the idea of effortless safety lost its shine. Each injury changed the public conversation a little more. The Segway no longer sounded like a flawless tech miracle. It sounded like a vehicle that demanded attention. Officials and property owners began thinking in terms of liability, not novelty. Guidelines, restrictions, and safety warnings followed because the risk was no longer theoretical. The machine still worked as designed, but the image shifted. It was not magic. It was transportation, and transportation carried consequences. The big promise of a new, everyday commuter tool did not land the way people expected. But the Segway did not disappear. Instead, it slipped into places where its strengths actually mattered. Controlled routes, predictable speeds, and short distances. Tour companies adopted it first because it turned a long walk into something faster without needing a car. The sales pitch changed. It stopped being about replacing walking for everyone. Once tours proved it could work reliably in public, other groups followed for a different reason. coverage. Security teams used Segways to move through malls, campuses, and event spaces without getting stuck in traffic or exhausted on foot. That meant more patrol area with the same staff. The machine became a work tool, not a lifestyle product. Practical needs finally gave it a job it could keep. Police units tested it in the same spirit. In crowded downtown zones and at big gatherings, a Segway let an officer move quickly, stop instantly, and stay visible at eye level. It filled a gap between walking and driving. This did not turn it into the future of commuting, but it did change the narrative. The Segway gained a foothold by being useful in specific roles, not by transforming daily life. By 2009, Segway reached a crossroads. It already proved it could work in certain jobs, but it still struggled to become a normal part of everyday life. That was when a new figure stepped in from outside the tech world. British entrepreneur Jimi Heselden bought the Segway company outright. Overnight, he stopped being just another businessman. He became the person responsible for where Segway went next. Heselden was not a distant investor who stayed in the background. He took ownership in the most direct way possible. He attached his name, his reputation, and his judgment to the brand. That mattered because Segway needed more than engineering at that point. It needed confidence from the public, and it needed someone willing to carry the risk of backing it. The purchase signaled a reset in leadership and direction. With Heselden as the new owner, Segway now had a clear public face, and that changed the stakes. If the company succeeded, the credit would land on him. If it failed, the blame would follow him too. He inherited every unresolved question around the machine: how safe it felt, who it truly served, and how big it could ever become. In 2009, Segway's future effectively narrowed to one man's decisions. After the purchase, Heselden did not stay in the background. He treated Segway like a product that still needed a fresh start, and he acted like its salesman-in-chief. The company leaned into that shift because a new owner brought new energy, and energy mattered. The goal was simple: make the machine look useful again, not just clever. Heselden pushed it as practical transportation, not a novelty. That meant promotion became more aggressive and more personal. Instead of letting the Segway speak through ads and press releases, Heselden put himself right on top of it. He rode it during visits, demonstrations, and public moments where cameras could see the confidence. Each ride worked like proof. If the owner trusted it, others might too. And the brand chased new markets, looking beyond early buyers toward organizations and workplaces. With that push came a quiet trade-off. The more Heselden tied the Segway to his own image, the more the machine's reputation traveled with him. He became its strongest advocate, and he used the most direct method possible. He kept riding. In practical terms, it supported the message of reliability. But it also meant something else. He spent more time on the device than almost anyone who could affect its future. By September 2010, Jimi Heselden spent a lot of time on the product he now owned. He rode it not as a stunt, but as something normal, another way to move around without a car. That day, he went out near his West Yorkshire estate. Following a canal-side route he already knew, it looked like a simple ride, but the location quietly raised the stakes. A canal path sounded harmless, yet it demanded attention. It narrowed in places, and it ran alongside a steep drop where there was no room for a sudden swerve. On a Segway, small inputs mattered: leaning, correcting, reacting. The machine was designed to balance, but it still depended on the rider's control and the surface staying predictable. Here, the margin for error stayed thin. This was not the kind of setting where a mistake ended with embarrassment and a scraped elbow. The edge sat close, and the fall beyond it turned a brief lapse into something irreversible. Heselden's regular use of the Segway placed him in this exact kind of real-world situation. Not a showroom floor, not a controlled demonstration, but a path with consequences. In this place, one wrong moment became enough. It happened in seconds. Heselden rode along the canal path, and then something went wrong. The Segway drifted too close to the edge, and control slipped away at exactly the worst moment. There was no room for recovery, no barrier to stop the movement, and no time to step off safely. The machine and its rider went over the drop together, tumbling into the ravine below. The fall left little doubt about the severity of what had occurred. Emergency services responded, but the injuries proved fatal. For a product built around balance and stability, it was a brutal contradiction. And this was not an anonymous rider. This was the man who owned the company, the figure most closely linked to the brand's future, dying during ordinary use in a familiar place. News of the accident spread fast, and the details hit like a shock. Headlines did not treat it as just another tragedy, because the connection felt too direct to ignore. The Segway was not simply present, it was central. A device sold as a safer, easier way to travel had been involved in the death of its own high-profile owner. The story turned instantly into a global talking point. In the days that followed, the focus shifted from shock to facts. Investigators worked through what could be confirmed and what could not. They checked the path where he had ridden, the steep drop nearby, and the basic sequence of events that led to the fall. They looked for anything that suggested a struggle, interference, or a second person. Nothing like that surfaced. The conclusion came back clear. It had been an accidental death with no evidence of foul play. That ruling mattered because it closed off the most tempting alternatives people reached for when a headline felt too strange to accept. There was no hidden plot to chase, no criminal angle to unravel. There was only a mistake and the unforgiving consequences of where it happened. And that finality changed how the public held the story. Without a mystery to solve, the event settled into something harder to process. A straight, tragic accident involving the person most tied to the product. The irony did not fade, it sharpened. People repeated the same detail again and again, not because it explained anything, but because it seemed to sum it up. Fate did not need help. In the years that followed, the Segway's reputation shifted in a way its creators never planned. It stayed on sidewalks and in public spaces, but not as the everyday commuter vehicle people once imagined. Instead, it turned into a symbol people referenced with a smirk. The big promise of changing city travel faded, replaced by a simpler story most people remembered. That story kept circling back to the same cruel detail. The company's owner died while riding the product he championed. The fact that investigators called it an accident did not soften how it landed in public memory. It hardened it. One moment on one ride began to outweigh years of engineering and marketing, and the irony became the headline that stuck. So when the Segway came up in conversation, it rarely came up as a transportation breakthrough. It came up as a cautionary tale and a cultural joke, a device that promised to make movement safer and easier, but ended up linked to a fatal fall. The contrast did the damage, a machine introduced as the future got filed away as a punchline.